It's strange, hearing nothing but your own breath and the faint hum of machinery when you look out and see a world so alien. That's what it was like as we touched down, the red dust of Mars swirling around us, painting the horizon with a haze that seemed endless. For a moment, none of us spoke. The silence inside our helmets felt louder than the faint beeping of the instruments that told us we'd made it. We were here. Mars. I remember gripping the edge of my seat tighter than I should have, my gloves squeaking against the armrests. Not because I was scared, though I was, but because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. There was nowhere to put the fear. When the engines finally powered down, the captain spoke first. Her voice crackled through the radio like a whisper that didn't want to disturb the quiet. We've landed. No one cheered. No one clapped. We just sat there staring through the tiny windows, trying to process what that meant. Years of training, countless simulations, leaving everything behind, our families, our world, had all led to this moment. And now that we were here, it didn't feel real. The airlock hissed as it opened, and for the first time, the sound of Mars greeted us. It wasn't much of a sound at all, really. Just the faint whistle of a thin atmosphere brushing against our suits. But it was enough to remind us we weren't on Earth anymore. The captain stepped out first, her boots crunching softly against the Martian soil. Even through my visor, I could see her shoulders tense. Not from fear, I think, but from the weight of it all. Every history book that would be written about this moment. Every future generation that would look back and wonder what it was like to be here first. She turned back to us, her voice steady but soft. "Come on." One by one, we followed. The ground felt strange underfoot. Not soft, not hard, but somewhere in between. Like walking on a beach where the sand had been left out to bake in the sun too long. I looked up at the sky. It wasn't blue like Earth's. It was this faded, burnt orange that stretched on forever. No clouds. No birds. Just an emptiness so vast it made your chest feel hollow. And yet, there was something beautiful about it. Something peaceful. The first few days were all about survival. Setting up the habitats, making sure the oxygenators were working, triple-checking the seals on the life support systems. Every task felt like it carried the weight of life and death. And maybe it did. Our habitats weren't much to look at. Inflatable domes anchored into the ground with metal stakes. Inside, it smelled like plastic and recycled air. It wasn't home, not yet, but it was enough to keep us alive. We worked mostly in silence those first few days, partly because we were exhausted, but mostly because there was so much to do. Every screw tightened, every panel locked into place felt like a small victory. At night, we gathered in the central hub, a larger dome where we'd eat and plan the next day's work. It was the only time we let ourselves relax, even if just a little. "Do you think they're watching us back home right now?" one of the engineers asked, her voice barely audible over the hum of the lights. "Probably," someone replied. "Wouldn't you?" We all chuckled softly at that, but it wasn't a happy laugh. More like the kind of laugh you let out when you're too tired to cry. The dust was relentless. It crept into every seam, every crack. No matter how well we sealed the habitats, it found a way in. It wasn't just annoying. It was dangerous. The fine particles could clog our equipment, damage our filters. We had to clean everything, every day. Outside, it was even worse. The storms would come without warning, walls of red swirling across the horizon like something out of a nightmare. During those storms, we couldn't go outside. The visibility dropped to zero, and the winds were strong enough to knock you over if you weren't careful. I remember one storm in particular. It lasted 3 days. We stayed inside, watching the red haze through the windows, listening to the howling wind that never seemed to let up. By the second day, the silence among us had turned into something heavier. No one said it out loud, but I think we were all wondering the same thing. What if it never stops? But it did. On the morning of the 4th day, the wind finally died down. The dust settled, and for the first time in days, we saw the sun again. It wasn't bright like on Earth, but it was enough. Enough to remind us why we were here. When the storm cleared, it felt like we were seeing Mars for the first time all over again. The red horizon stretched out in every direction, dotted with jagged rocks and small hills that looked like frozen waves. It was alien, yes, but also strangely familiar. A barren wilderness, yet it felt alive in its own way. We ventured out to inspect the damage. The dust had piled up against the habitats, burying the lower panels almost halfway. Clearing it was backbreaking work, but no one complained. There was something cathartic about digging out, like we were reclaiming the world one shovel at a time. I remember stopping to catch my breath and looking up at the hills in the distance. I could see our rover parked just beyond the habitat, its surface coated in red dust. Beyond it, the land seemed to go on forever. I wondered what was out there, what secrets this planet was hiding under all that dust. "Looks like we'll need to check the solar panels next," the captain said, her voice breaking my thoughts. "They're probably covered." And they were. By the time we finished cleaning them, our suits were coated in so much dust that we looked like we belonged to the planet. But when the system powered back on and the lights in the habitat flickered to life, it was worth it. Food was always on our minds. The supplies we brought from Earth were enough to last us a few months, but we knew we'd have to start growing our own sooner or later. The hydroponic systems were set up in one of the domes, a controlled environment where we could regulate the temperature, light, and humidity. The first seeds we planted were potatoes. It felt like a nod to every science fiction story we'd ever read about surviving on Mars. But it wasn't fiction now. This was real, and if those tiny seeds didn't sprout, we were in trouble. Every day, someone would check on them, measuring the moisture levels, adjusting the lights, taking notes. It felt like waiting for a baby to be born, the way we all held our breath every time we looked into the tanks. And then one day, it happened. Tiny green shoots pushing up through the soil. It was the smallest thing, but in that moment, it felt like we'd conquered the world. "Life," the engineer whispered, her voice cracking. "We've made life here." We all gathered around, staring at those tiny leaves like they were a miracle. And maybe they were. In a place so barren, so empty, we had managed to create something living. It was a reminder that even here, in the harshest conditions imaginable, life could find a way. I didn't expect to miss the sunrise as much as I did. On Earth, it's something you don't even think about most days. You wake up, the sky changes colors, and the day begins. But here, the sun rises differently. It's slower, dimmer, more distant. And the colors aren't the warm oranges and yellows of home. They're cooler, more muted, like the world is waking up reluctantly. I watched my first Martian sunrise alone. The others were still asleep, and I had taken the early shift monitoring the systems. I stepped outside just as the horizon began to glow faintly, the sun creeping up over the hills like it was shy. For a moment, I forgot where I was. It was just me and the light, the silence of the planet wrapping around me like a blanket. And then I remembered. This was Mars. This was a place where no human had ever stood to watch the sun rise before. I felt small in that moment, but not in a bad way. Small in a way that made me feel connected to something bigger. When I went back inside, the others were waking up. I didn't tell them about the sunrise. I wanted them to see it for themselves. If the dust was a constant nuisance, the cold was our enemy. Nights on Mars are brutal. The temperature drops so low it feels like the air itself is trying to freeze you. Inside the habitats, the heaters worked overtime to keep us warm, but you could still feel the chill seeping in through the walls. Outside, it was even worse. Our suits were designed to handle the cold, but that didn't make it any easier. Every step felt like wading through quicksand, the cold sapping your strength with each movement. One night, the heating system in the central hub failed. It happened suddenly, the temperature inside dropping so fast we could see our breath. We scrambled to fix it, bundling up in every layer we had while we worked. The engineer finally got it running again, after what felt like hours. When the heat returned, we all sat there in silence, too tired to celebrate. But in that silence, there was a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the warmth, for each other, for the fact that we were still here. We had been sending signals back to Earth since the day we landed, but the delays made it feel like we were talking to ghosts. By the time we sent a message and got a reply, days would have passed. It was hard to feel connected when the conversations were so slow. But one day, we picked up something unexpected. A faint signal, coming from somewhere on the surface of Mars. At first, we thought it was a glitch, some interference in the system. But as we listened, it became clear. This was something real. The captain called us all into the hub, her face pale. "We're not alone," she said, her voice trembling. The room went silent. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then someone asked the question we were all thinking. "Is it human?" We didn't know. The signal was weak, fragmented, impossible to decode. But it was enough to make us wonder. Enough to remind us that Mars still had secrets to share. We couldn't stop thinking about the signal. It wasn't like anything we'd expected to find. Mars wasn't supposed to have a voice, let alone one that could reach us. Yet there it was. A faint, broken transmission cutting through the static. "Could it be from Earth?" someone asked, their voice full of doubt. The captain shook her head. "Not with this frequency, it's local. Somewhere here." The weight of her words settled over us like the Martian dust. Local. That meant the signal wasn't coming from Earth, from orbit, or from a satellite. It was coming from the planet itself. We triangulated the source to an area about 20 kilometers from our base. A rugged region of cliffs and valleys we hadn't explored yet. The maps we'd studied on Earth had labeled it as unremarkable, just another stretch of barren land. But now it wasn't unremarkable. Now it was a mystery. Preparing for the journey took longer than we liked. Every piece of equipment had to be checked and double-checked. Mars didn't forgive mistakes, and we couldn't risk running out of oxygen or losing power in the middle of nowhere. The rover was loaded with supplies: water, food, extra oxygen tanks. We packed tools and spare parts, not knowing what kind of terrain we'd face. The signal was faint but steady, like a whisper calling us into the unknown. The morning we set out, the sky was clear. The horizon stretched endlessly before us, the red landscape glowing softly under the pale sun. The wheels of the rover crunched against the ground, leaving tracks in the dust that seemed to vanish as soon as we passed. Inside, we were quiet. The hum of the engine filled the cabin, but no one spoke. I think we were all lost in our own thoughts, wondering what we'd find, or if we'd find anything at all. The terrain grew rougher as we approached the source of the signal. The flat plains gave way to rocky ridges and steep inclines that tested the rover's suspension. We moved slowly, carefully, scanning the ground for anything unusual. And then we saw it. A valley stretched out before us, its edges jagged and sharp like broken glass. In the center, there was a depression, a dark patch of ground that didn't match the surrounding landscape. "That's where it's coming from," the captain said, her voice barely above a whisper. We parked the rover at the edge and suited up, checking each other's gear one last time. The descent was tricky, the loose rocks sliding under our boots with every step. By the time we reached the bottom, my heart was pounding, not from exertion but from the weight of what we were about to uncover. At first, it didn't look like much, just a dark patch of ground covered in fine dust. But as we brushed it away, we found something beneath the surface. Metal. It wasn't like the rocks around it. This was smooth, polished, with a strange iridescent sheen that shifted colors when the sunlight hit it. We cleared more dust, revealing what looked like a hatch. "This isn't natural," one of the scientists said, his voice trembling. This was made." The realization hit us all at once. We weren't the first. Someone, or something, had been here before us. We tried to open the hatch, but it wouldn't budge. The metal was cold, unyielding, and we didn't have the tools to force it open. Frustrated, we scanned the area, looking for any clues about who or what had left it here. And then the signal changed. The faint, broken transmission we'd been following grew louder, clearer, until it filled our helmets with a rhythmic pulse. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, but it wasn't random either. It felt deliberate, like a language we couldn't understand. We recorded everything, hoping someone back on Earth could make sense of it. But deep down, I think we all knew this was beyond anything we'd prepared for. This wasn't just a discovery. This was contact. The captain called it. We head back. We need more equipment and more answers. None of us wanted to leave, but we knew she was right. The hatch wasn't going anywhere, and we had no idea what might happen if we stayed. Back at the habitat, the atmosphere was electric. Everyone was talking at once, replaying the recording of the signal, poring over the images we'd taken of the hatch. Theories flew around like sparks, each one wilder than the last. Maybe it's a probe, one scientist suggested. Something left behind by a past mission. But it doesn't match any known designs, someone else argued. This is different. Different. That word hung in the air like a challenge. What if this wasn't human? What if Mars wasn't as empty as we thought? We sent the data back to Earth, knowing it would take days to get a response. In the meantime, we waited. The days dragged on, the signal from the hatch a constant reminder of the mystery we couldn't solve. Some of us threw ourselves into work, trying to keep busy. Others sat by the radio, listening to the pulse of the signal like it might suddenly reveal its secrets. And then the reply came. It wasn't what we expected. "Proceed with caution," the message read. "Further investigation authorized." That was it. No explanation, no advice. Just a green light to keep going. The next morning, we prepared to go back to the valley. This time we brought everything we had: cutting tools, scanning equipment, a portable generator. The air in the habitat was tense as we suited up, each of us running through our tasks in our minds. The captain gave us a briefing before we left. "We don't know what we're dealing with," she said. "Stay alert, follow protocol, and report anything unusual immediately." The rover ride was quieter than before. The first time, we'd been full of curiosity, unsure if we'd even find anything. Now we knew what was waiting for us, and the weight of that knowledge pressed down on us. When we reached the valley, the hatch looked just as we'd left it. The metallic surface gleamed under the weak sunlight, its colors shifting like oil on water. The signal was still there, pulsing steadily in our helmets. We set up our equipment and got to work. The first challenge was figuring out how to open it. The surface of the hatch was seamless, with no visible hinges or handles. We scanned it with every tool we had, searching for a weak point or a mechanism we could activate. After hours of frustration, one of the scientists noticed something. A faint pattern etched into the metal, almost invisible under the layer of dust. It looked like a series of concentric circles, with a small indentation in the center. We cleared the dust away and placed a probe into the indentation. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low hum that made the ground vibrate, the hatch began to move. The metal split into segments, each one sliding outward with a precision that was almost hypnotic. As the hatch opened, a faint light spilled out from the darkness below. The captain was the first to step forward. She shone her light into the opening, revealing a narrow shaft lined with smooth, metallic walls. A ladder extended down into the depths, disappearing into the shadows. "We're going in," she said. We followed her one by one, our boots clanging softly against the rungs of the ladder. The descent felt endless, the light from the surface growing dimmer with each step. My heart pounded in my chest, and I had to remind myself to breathe. When we finally reached the bottom, the shaft opened into a chamber unlike anything I'd ever seen. The walls were covered in intricate patterns that seemed to glow faintly, casting the room in a soft, eerie light. The air was cold but not lifeless. It felt purposeful, as if the chamber itself was aware of our presence. The room was larger than we'd expected, with smooth floors and walls that curved gracefully, like the inside of a shell. In the center there was a pedestal, and on it, a device that pulsed with the same rhythm as the signal we'd been following. It was unlike anything we'd ever seen. The device was a perfect sphere, its surface shifting like liquid metal. As we approached, it reacted, the light inside it growing brighter, the pulse quickening. One of the scientists reached out to touch it, but the captain stopped her. "We don't know what it is," she said, her voice firm. "Let's scan it first." We set up our equipment, taking readings and measurements. The device emitted a low hum, almost like a heartbeat. It wasn't just a machine, it felt alive. As we worked, The signal changed again. The rhythmic pulse gave way to something more complex, a series of tones and patterns that seemed to form a language. It wasn't random. It was trying to communicate. We recorded everything, sending the data back to Earth. But deep down, we knew we wouldn't get answers in time. Whatever this was, we were the ones who had to face it. The captain made the call. We're taking it back with us. Carefully, we lifted the device from the pedestal. It was surprisingly light, almost as if it wasn't entirely solid. The moment we removed it, the patterns on the walls dimmed, and the chamber grew colder. We climbed back up the ladder, carrying the device like it was a sacred artifact. When we reached the surface, the sun was setting, painting the horizon in shades of crimson and gold. Back at the habitat, the device became the center of our world. We set it up in the lab, surrounding it with every instrument we had. The signal it emitted continued to shift, the patterns growing more intricate, more deliberate. None of us slept that night. We took shifts monitoring the device, watching for any changes. At one point, I swore I saw it move. Not much, just a slight ripple across its surface, like a drop of water in a still pond. The next morning, the captain called a meeting. "Whatever this is," she said, "it's not just a machine. It's something more." We all knew what she meant. This wasn't just a discovery. This was life, intelligent life. The news spread quickly. Within days, Earth was buzzing with speculation. The media called it the greatest discovery in human history, but to us, it felt more like a burden. Everyone wanted answers: scientists, governments, the public. And we were the only ones who could provide them. The pressure was immense. Every day we sent updates back to Earth, detailing our findings. But the more we studied the device, the more questions we had. What was it? Where did it come from? And why was it here? Then, one night, it happened. The signal shifted again, the patterns aligning into something recognizable. It wasn't just noise, it was a message, a map. The captain stared at the screen, her eyes wide. "It's pointing to another location." We all leaned in, tracing the lines of the map. The coordinates were clear, leading us to a region hundreds of kilometers away. It was farther than we'd ever traveled, deeper into the unknown. But there was no question about what we had to do. The signal had led us to the hatch, and now it was leading us somewhere else. Somewhere even more mysterious. The coordinates pointed to a region called the Cerberus Fossae, a network of deep fissures and canyons carved into Mars' crust. On Earth, it had been mapped from orbit, a desolate area of cracked ground and jagged ridges. But no one had ever been there, not until now. Preparing for the journey was an expedition in itself. This wasn't like the valley we'd visited before. The Cerberus Fossae was hundreds of kilometers away, farther than our rover had ever traveled. We had to plan for every possibility: breakdowns, storms, supply shortages. Failure wasn't an option. The captain held a meeting the night before we left. "This is the biggest risk we've taken since landing here," she said, her voice steady but serious. "We need to be ready for anything. If something goes wrong, we might not make it back." No one said a word. We all knew the stakes. The morning we left, the base felt eerily quiet. Half the team stayed behind to monitor the habitat and maintain communications, while the rest of us loaded the rover with everything we could fit: tools, supplies, spare parts. The device came with us, packed securely in a case designed to protect it from the elements. The sun was just beginning to rise as we set off, casting long shadows across the red landscape. The rover's wheels churned through the dust, leaving tracks that stretched out behind us like a tether to the home we were leaving. Inside the cabin, the tension was palpable. No one spoke much, but the weight of the journey hung over us. Every bump in the terrain felt like a reminder of how fragile our situation was. Mars wasn't forgiving, and neither was the distance. The drive took days. At night, we parked the rover and set up temporary shelters, small inflatable pods just big enough to sleep in. The cold outside was relentless, seeping into the walls of the pods no matter how high we cranked the heaters. During the day, the terrain grew rougher. The flat plains gave way to jagged hills and rocky outcrops that forced us to navigate carefully. One wrong turn, one mechanical failure, and we'd be stranded. The device stayed silent for most of the journey, its surface rippling faintly as if it were alive. But as we got closer to the coordinates, the signal grew stronger. The pulses became faster, more urgent, like it was guiding us. When we finally reached the Cerberus Fossae, the sight took our breath away. The ground opened up before us, a series of deep fissures that stretched as far as the eye could see. The edges were jagged, the rock dark and broken, as if the planet itself had been torn apart. The signal was strongest here, pulsing so loudly in our helmets that it felt like a heartbeat. We parked the rover near the edge of the largest fissure and stepped out, the ground crunching under our boots. The captain held up a scanner, her face tense as she studied the readings. "It's coming from down there," she said, pointing into the darkness of the fissure. I peered over the edge, my stomach churning. The drop was dizzying, the bottom shrouded in shadow. Whatever was down there, it wasn't going to be easy to reach. We set up ropes and harnesses, securing ourselves before beginning the climb down. The walls of the fissure were rough and sharp, the rock crumbling under our gloves as we descended. Every step felt precarious, like one wrong move could send us plummeting into the abyss. The deeper we went, the colder it became. The light from the surface grew faint, replaced by an eerie glow that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The patterns we'd seen in the hatch were here too, etched into the rock like a language we couldn't read. By the time we reached the bottom, the glow was brighter, casting strange shadows across the fissure. And in the center of it all, there was a structure. It looked ancient, yet untouched by time. A series of arches and pillars, carved from the same glowing material as the walls. The structure rose up from the ground like a monument, its surfaces smooth and symmetrical in a way that didn't feel natural. The signal was deafening now, vibrating through the air like a physical presence. The device we'd brought with us reacted, its surface pulsing in sync with the glow of the structure. It felt like they were speaking to each other, two parts of the same whole. The captain approached cautiously, her hand resting on the device. "This isn't human," she said, her voice barely audible. None of us disagreed. This was something else entirely, something older, something alien. As we stepped closer, the device began to change. Its surface rippled, the light inside it growing brighter until it was almost blinding. And then, without warning, the structure came to life. The arches lit up, their glow pulsing in time with the device. The ground beneath us vibrated, and a sound filled the air, a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. We stepped back, unsure of what was happening. The light grew brighter, the hum louder, until it felt like the entire fissure was alive. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The silence was deafening. The light dimmed, leaving the structure glowing faintly. But something had changed. The signal was gone. "What just happened?" someone whispered, their voice trembling. The captain didn't answer. She was staring at the structure, her face pale. And in that moment, I realized something. The structure wasn't just a monument. It was a doorway. The glow from the structure pulsed faintly, casting long, shifting shadows across the fissure floor. The air felt heavier now, charged with a kind of tension that was impossible to ignore. We stood in silence, staring at the doorway, none of us daring to move. The captain broke the silence. "It's waiting." "Waiting for what?" someone asked, their voice cracking. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer, her gloved hand reaching out to touch the smooth surface of the arch. The glow rippled under her touch, spreading out like water disturbed by a stone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the space within the arch began to shift. It wasn't light or shadow. It was something in between, like the fabric of reality was folding in on itself. Colors we couldn't name danced across the surface, and a sound, low, melodic, and almost soothing, filled the air. "It's a doorway," the captain said, her voice steady but quiet. "And it's open." We stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The doorway was unlike anything we'd ever seen, and the thought of stepping through it filled me with equal parts awe and dread. What was on the other side? Where would it lead? And perhaps most terrifying of all, would we be able to come back? The captain turned to us, her face unreadable behind her visor. "This is what we came here for," she said. "To uncover the unknown. But no one's going through unless we all agree." There was a long pause as we exchanged glances. The weight of the decision hung over us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, one of the scientists spoke. "If we don't go, we'll never know." That settled it. One by one we nodded, though I think we were all terrified. The captain stepped forward, her movements slow and deliberate. "Stay close," she said, "and no matter what happens, we stick together." The moment I stepped through the doorway, it felt like the world dissolved around me. There was no sense of up or down, no air to breathe, no ground to stand on, just a feeling of being pulled, gently but irresistibly, through something vast and unknowable. And then, just as suddenly, it was over. I was standing on solid ground again, my boots crunching against a surface that felt strange, soft yet firm, like walking on tightly packed moss. The air was different too, thicker but not oppressive, with a faint metallic taste. I looked around, my heart pounding. We were in a place that defied explanation. The sky above us was a swirling tapestry of colors, shifting and blending in ways that seemed almost alive. The ground was dotted with structures that resembled the one we'd just passed through, their glowing surfaces casting an otherworldly light. "Where are we?" someone whispered. The captain's voice came through the radio, steady but tinged with awe. "We're not on Mars anymore." The landscape stretched out in every direction, both familiar and alien at once. Towering spires of crystalline material jutted up from the ground, their surfaces shimmering like polished glass. In the distance, we could see what looked like a river, its waters glowing faintly as they wound through the terrain. The air was silent except for the faint hum that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. It wasn't a sound so much as a feeling, a vibration that resonated in my chest. It was calming and unsettling all at once. As we moved cautiously forward, we realized we weren't alone. Tiny, flickering lights darted through the air like fireflies, their movements erratic but purposeful. They didn't seem to notice us, or maybe they didn't care. Either way, they added to the surreal beauty of the place. "This isn't just another planet," one of the scientists said, their voice trembling. "This is something else entirely." The structures we'd seen from a distance were even more impressive up close. They were massive, towering over us like ancient monuments. Their surfaces were covered in the same intricate patterns as the doorway, glowing softly in the dim light. We approached cautiously, scanning the nearest structure for any signs of danger. It didn't seem hostile, but it wasn't entirely inert either. As we got closer, the patterns on its surface shifted, almost as if it were reacting to our presence. The captain placed a hand on the structure, and the glow intensified. A series of symbols appeared, floating in the air like holograms. They were beautiful, but incomprehensible, their meaning just out of reach. "It's trying to communicate," the captain said, "but we don't understand the language." As we explored further, we began to notice strange echoes, faint sounds that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. They weren't words, but they weren't random either. It was as if the world itself was alive, speaking in a language we couldn't quite grasp. The device we'd brought with us started reacting again, its surface rippling in time with the echoes. It pulsed with light, casting long shadows across the ground. It felt like it was responding, like it was part of this place. We followed the echoes, letting them guide us through the landscape. They led us to a massive structure in the center of the area, larger and more intricate than anything we'd seen so far. It pulsed with the same rhythm as the device, its glow bright enough to light up the surrounding terrain. "This is it," the captain said. "This is what the signal was leading us to." The entrance to the central structure was wide and inviting, the glowing patterns on its surface swirling like liquid light. As we stepped inside, the air changed. It felt heavier, denser, but not oppressive. More like the world was holding its breath. The chamber inside was vast, its walls curving upward into a dome that seemed to touch the sky. In the center, there was a pedestal, and on it, another device, larger than the one we'd brought, but unmistakably similar. The device we carried pulsed brightly, as if recognizing its counterpart. The moment we placed it on the pedestal, the entire room lit up. Symbols and patterns danced across the walls, and the echoes grew louder, coalescing into a symphony of sound and light. And then, a voice. It wasn't a voice in the way we understood it, but a presence, a thought that resonated in our minds. It spoke without words, but we understood it all the same. You are the first. The words, or what felt like words, hung in the air. You are the first. None of us moved. None of us spoke. It wasn't just the message that had shaken us. It was the way it had been delivered. It wasn't sound. It wasn't text. It was something deeper, as if the world itself had placed the thought directly into our minds. The captain was the first to respond. Who, or what, are you? She asked, her voice trembling but steady. There was a pause, a silence so profound it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Then, the presence returned. We are the ones who came before, it said. We are the builders. The patterns on the walls shifted, forming images that seemed to tell a story. We saw what looked like planets, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Structures similar to the one we were standing in appeared on each world, their glowing patterns pulsing with life. Then, one by one, the planets dimmed, their lights extinguishing until only a few remained. What happened? One of the scientists whispered, their voice barely audible. The presence answered. Time, change, loss. We were many. Now we are few. The images shifted again, showing the surface of Mars. The planet looked different, greener, alive. The structures pulsed with light, their energy spreading across the landscape. And then, as before, the lights dimmed, the planet growing barren and red. This place, the captain began, struggling to find the words. It was alive? Yes, the presence replied, and it can be again. The presence explained, or perhaps showed us, its purpose. The structures were not just monuments. They were machines, designed to sustain life. The device we had carried with us was a key, one of many, created to activate the network of structures scattered across the planet. You have brought the key, it said. You can restore what was lost. The weight of its words was almost unbearable. We weren't just explorers anymore. We were caretakers, inheritors of a responsibility that spanned eons. But why us? The captain asked. Why now? Because you came, the presence replied simply. Because you chose to see. The presence guided us through the structure, its walls glowing brighter with each step. It showed us a map, a detailed network of similar structures spread across Mars, connected by lines of energy that crisscrossed the planet. The network was dormant, but the presence assured us it could be reactivated. This world can live again, it said, but the choice is yours. The captain turned to us, her expression unreadable. We have to do this, she said. If there's even a chance, we have to try. No one disagreed. The thought of breathing life back into this barren world was more than a mission. It was a calling. The presence showed us how to activate the network. It wasn't easy. The structures were old, their systems fragile. We worked carefully, restoring connections, rerouting power, and recalibrating the devices. Each step felt like waking up a sleeping giant. As the network began to stir, the changes were immediate. The air inside the structure grew warmer, the light brighter. Outside, the ground began to shift, the red dust swirling as if swept by an invisible hand. And then the first spark of green. A tiny sprout, pushing through the dust. It was small, almost insignificant, but it was enough to take our breath away. It's working, one of the scientists whispered, their voice filled with awe. It's really working. The changes spread quickly. The structures across the network lit up, their energy pulsing through the ground like veins carrying life. The air grew thicker, the temperature warmer. The barren landscape began to transform before our eyes. It wasn't just plants. Water began to flow through ancient riverbeds, filling basins and carving new paths through the terrain. The once silent wind carried the sound of movement. of life. The presence spoke again, its voice softer now. This is only the beginning. Restoring the network wasn't without its challenges. Some of the structures were damaged beyond repair, their systems too degraded to function. Others resisted activation, their energy sparking erratically before fading back into silence. We pushed ourselves to the limit, working day and night to restore as much of the network as we could. But the planet's transformation wasn't instant. It was slow, painstaking, and often frustrating. For every victory, there were setbacks that reminded us of how fragile the process was. "There's so much more to do," the captain said one night, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "We might not live to see it finished." "But we started it," I replied. "And that's enough." As the days turned into weeks, the changes became undeniable. Patches of green spread across the landscape, rivers carved new paths through the dust, and the air grew warmer with each passing day. Mars was changing, slowly but surely, and we were witnessing it. The presence grew quieter as the network stabilized, its guidance less frequent, but no less important. It had given us the tools to restore the planet, but the responsibility was ours now. "This is your world," it said in what would be its final message. "Guard it well." And then it was gone. We returned to our base, the weight of our mission still heavy but tempered by hope. The landscape around us was no longer barren. The first signs of a new ecosystem were emerging, fragile but full of potential. Back on Earth, the news of our success spread like wildfire. People called it the second Genesis, a chance to create a new world from the ashes of the old. But for us, it was simpler than that. It was home. Life on Mars wasn't easier, but it was different now. The land that once felt lifeless had begun to change in ways we couldn't have imagined. Patches of green sprouted across the red soil, and the air, though still thin and cold, felt less hostile. There were mornings when we'd step outside and see small tendrils of mist curling over newly formed streams, like the planet was beginning to breathe again. But the transformation wasn't just about the environment. It was about us, too. We weren't just explorers anymore. We were settlers, caretakers of a world that was coming back to life. And with that realization came a sense of responsibility that none of us could ignore. Every day brought new challenges. The work was exhausting, relentless. Some of the structures in the network required constant maintenance, their systems still fragile after centuries of dormancy. The storms, though less frequent now, still swept through the landscape with enough force to undo weeks of progress. Yet, for every setback, there was progress. And for every moment of doubt, there was a reminder of why we were here. The sight of green shoots breaking through the dust, the sound of water trickling over rocks, the first faint whispers of wind carrying something that almost felt like life. It was mid-morning when the signal came through, clearer than anything we'd received since landing. The message was brief, but its implications were enormous. "The Council has approved Phase 2. Supplies and reinforcements are on their way." Phase 2. We'd heard whispers of it before we left Earth, vague plans about expanding the mission if the conditions allowed. But hearing those words now, with Mars changing all around us, made it real. The captain gathered us in the central hub, her expression unreadable. "They're sending more people," she said. "More equipment. They want us to prepare for a permanent settlement." The room fell silent. We'd spent so long surviving, so long fighting for every inch of progress, that the idea of more humans joining us felt almost alien. But it wasn't unwelcome. If anything, it felt like the next step, one we were finally ready to take. Weeks later, the sky above the base was split by a streak of fire, a supply ship entering the atmosphere. It was the first human-made object we'd seen in months, and its arrival felt like a lifeline. We watched from the ridge as the ship descended, its landing thrusters kicking up a plume of red dust. When the hatch opened and the first figures stepped out, there was a moment of disbelief. After so much time alone, seeing new faces felt surreal. The new crew brought with them more than just supplies. They brought stories of Earth, updates from home, and a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time, our small group of pioneers felt like the beginning of something bigger. With the reinforcements came new challenges. More people meant more mouths to feed, more shelters to build, more systems to maintain. The base that had once been just enough for us now felt cramped, its walls too close for comfort. But it also brought something we hadn't realized we were missing: community. There were nights when we'd gather in the central hub, the room filled with laughter and voices, the air alive with the energy of people working toward a common goal. One of the new arrivals, a botanist named Lena, became an instant leader in the effort to expand the green zones. She spent hours in the hydroponics dome, her hands coated in Martian soil as she coaxed life from the ground. Her passion was infectious, and soon we were all working alongside her, planting seeds and watching them grow. As the weeks turned into months, the base began to transform. What had started as a cluster of habitats became something more, a settlement. We built new domes, expanded the hydroponic systems, and even started carving out paths between the structures, creating the first semblance of streets. We called it New Horizon. It wasn't much, just a few domes and a scattering of tents, but it was ours. And every time we stepped outside and saw the green creeping further across the landscape, it felt like a promise. Mars was no longer just a planet. It was a home. The presence, the voice of the builders, had been silent since we activated the network, but their influence was everywhere. The more we explored, the more we found: hidden chambers beneath the structures, ancient tools that defied explanation, and artifacts that hinted at a civilization far more advanced than our own. One day, while exploring a newly discovered chamber, we found something that stopped us in our tracks. It was a mural, etched into the glowing walls, depicting scenes that looked eerily familiar. There were planets, structures, and what appeared to be humans, or at least something very much like us. "What does this mean?" one of the scientists asked, their voice barely a whisper. The captain's expression was unreadable. "It means we're not just here by chance." The more we uncovered, the more we felt the weight of our connection to this place. The builders hadn't just left Mars behind, they had left it for us. The network, the structures, the tools, they were all designed to be used by hands like ours, minds like ours. And as the planet continued to change, it felt like it was welcoming us. The air grew thicker, the nights warmer. The storms that had once been so relentless began to subside, their winds carrying the faintest scent of something new: life. With the settlement thriving and the planet transforming, our focus began to shift. We were no longer just surviving. We were building something for the future. Plans were drawn up for larger habitats, more advanced systems, and even the first Martian school, a place where future generations could learn about the planet they would call home. The dream of a self-sustaining colony was no longer just a dream. It was a reality, one we were living every day. And yet, there was still so much we didn't know. The builders, the network, the artifacts. We'd only scratched the surface of Mars's mysteries. But for the first time, the unknown didn't feel daunting. It felt like an invitation. As I sit here writing these words, I can hear the sounds of the settlement around me. The hum of machinery, the laughter of children, the rustle of leaves in the Martian wind. This is the world we've built, a world that was waiting for us all along. Mars is alive, and so are we. This is just the beginning. The first child born on Mars was a girl. Her name was Mira, which meant hope in several languages back on Earth. She arrived in the early hours of a Martian morning, just as the first rays of the sun stretched across the settlement. The news spread quickly, and for a moment, the entire base paused to celebrate. Mira's birth changed everything. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about building a future. The sight of her tiny hand grasping her mother's finger was a reminder of why we were here. Not just to explore, but to create a new world for those who would come after us. We built a small nursery in one of the newer domes, filling it with bright lights and plants to make it feel less sterile. People stopped by daily, bringing small gifts: a hand-carved toy, a blanket stitched from spare material, a tiny helmet made for her first steps outside. Mira became a symbol for all of us, a living reminder that Mars wasn't just a place we'd come to visit. It was home. New Horizon continued to grow. The arrival of additional settlers brought more than just hands to help. It brought ideas, innovations, and a sense of community we hadn't realized we were missing. Each new person added something unique to the settlement, whether it was a skill, a story, or simply a different way of seeing the world. We built new domes, larger and more connected than the original habitats. Solar farms stretched out across the plains, their panels gleaming under the weak Martian sun. Hydroponic gardens expanded, producing not just the basics, but a surprising variety of crops. Lettuce, beans, even tomatoes. There was talk of trying to grow flowers next, just to see if we could. The first Martian marketplace opened in a converted cargo dome, its shelves stocked with goods produced right here on the planet. People traded, bartered, and shared, creating a small but thriving economy that felt more personal than anything we'd known on Earth. Life on Mars wasn't without its challenges. The thin atmosphere, the constant dust, the ever-present risk of equipment failure. All of it reminded us that this planet, while changing, was still a harsh and unforgiving place. One particularly brutal storm swept through the settlement, knocking out power to half the domes and damaging several key systems. We worked through the night to restore power, battling the cold and the howling winds that seemed determined to tear everything apart. By morning, the storm had passed, but the scars it left behind were a stark reminder of how fragile our existence here still was. But for every challenge, there was a victory. When we repaired the solar farm, we upgraded it to produce even more power. When a water line froze, we found a way to insulate it better. Every setback taught us something, made us stronger, more adaptable. Mars was testing us, but we were passing. One day, while excavating near an older structure, we discovered something extraordinary. Beneath layers of rock and dust, hidden in a chamber we'd almost missed, was a device unlike anything we'd seen before. It was larger than the key we'd found, its surface covered in the same intricate patterns, but its design was more complex, more refined. We brought it back to the settlement, unsure of its purpose but certain of its importance. As we studied it, the patterns began to shift, forming shapes that seemed to mimic the layout of our settlement. The device wasn't just a tool, it was a guide. Using its instructions, we began to make changes to our systems. The solar farm became more efficient. The water purification units began to produce cleaner water with less energy. Even the air recyclers, which had always struggled to keep up, began to function more smoothly. "It's like they left it for us," one of the engineers said, staring at the device in awe. "Like they knew we'd need it." The green zones were expanding faster than we'd thought possible. What had started as small patches of plants near the hydroponic domes had grown into sprawling fields of vegetation. The builder's network was working, creating conditions that allowed life to flourish. Then came the trees. The first saplings were planted near the edge of the settlement, their roots carefully nurtured in enriched soil. For weeks, they seemed fragile, their thin trunks swaying in the wind. But slowly, they grew stronger. Leaves unfurled, green and vibrant against the red backdrop of the Martian soil. By the time the first tree reached full height, the settlement had changed. The air was thicker, the ground softer. The trees provided shade, their roots anchoring the soil and preventing erosion. And as the wind rustled through their branches, it carried a sound we hadn't heard in months, the gentle whisper of leaves. Back on Earth, the story of New Horizon captured the world's imagination. People watched in awe as we sent back images of the changing planet, streams cutting through the red soil, fields of green stretching toward the horizon, children playing under the shade of Martian trees. The messages we received from Earth were filled with hope, curiosity, and a deep longing to be part of what we were building. More volunteers signed up for the mission, ready to leave their lives behind for a chance to start over on Mars. But there were also voices of caution. Some worried about the risks of overexpansion, about losing control of the fragile balance we'd created. Others questioned whether humanity had the right to reshape an entire planet. The captain addressed these concerns in one of our transmissions. "Mars isn't just ours," she said. "It belongs to the universe. But if we don't care for it, if we don't nurture it, it will remain lifeless. This is our chance to create something better, not just for ourselves, but for everyone." As I write this, I'm sitting under the shade of one of the first Martian trees. The air around me is warm, carrying the faint scent of soil and leaves. In the distance, I can hear the laughter of children playing near the stream, their voices echoing across the red hills. This is Mars now, a place where life, fragile but determined, has taken root. A place where we found not just survival, but meaning. The builders left us a gift, a chance to start over, to build a world that reflects the best of who we are. And as I look around, I can't help but feel that we've only just begun. Mars isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of something new, something better. And though the road ahead will be long and full of challenges, I know, that we'll rise to meet it. The builders' presence lingered in subtle ways. Though their direct communication had ceased, their legacy was woven into every aspect of our lives on Mars. Their structures, their tools, their inexplicable understanding of what life needed to flourish. It all felt purposeful, almost intimate. One evening, while working in the hydroponics dome, I noticed something unusual. The glow from one of the smaller devices we'd recovered had changed, its light shifting to a soft, rhythmic pulse. I called the captain, who arrived moments later, her face unreadable. "It's not random," she said after watching the pulses for several minutes. It's listening." We began to notice similar changes in other devices. The builder's technology, once dormant and passive, seemed to be reacting to us. Lights flickered when we spoke. Patterns shifted in response to touch. It felt as though the planet itself was learning, adapting to its new inhabitants. "It's not just us shaping Mars," Lena said one day, her hands buried in soil as she planted new seeds. "It's shaping us too." When the next wave of settlers arrived, it was clear how much Mars had changed. The landscape they stepped into was a world away from the barren wasteland we had first encountered. Streams glistened under the pale sun, green fields stretched toward the horizon, and the air, though still thin, carried a warmth that hinted at life. The newcomers brought new energy, new ideas. They came from all walks of life: scientists, engineers, teachers, artists. Each of them carried a piece of Earth with them, stories and skills that began to blend into the fabric of our growing community. One of the artists, a young woman named Sophia, started carving murals into the walls of the domes. Her work depicted our journey, the barren land we had first encountered, the structures we had uncovered, the green fields we had nurtured into existence. Her art became a unifying force, a way for us to see ourselves as part of a larger story. With more families joining the settlement, the need for a school became undeniable. The children who had come with the newcomers, and those like Mira, born on Mars, deserved a place to learn, to grow, to dream. We converted one of the older domes into a classroom, filling it with books, solar-powered tablets, and artifacts from both Earth and Mars. The first lesson was taught by a retired teacher named Harold, who had volunteered for the mission after spending decades in a classroom back home. I'll never forget the sight of him standing in front of the children, a globe of Earth in one hand and a piece of Martian rock in the other. "This," he said, his voice steady and kind, "is where we come from, and this is where we are. But what matters most is where we're going." The school became more than just a place for lessons. It became a symbol of hope, a promise that the next generation would carry our work forward. The more we explored the builders' structures, the more we realized how little we understood them. One day, while excavating near a particularly large formation, we discovered a chamber filled with glowing panels that seemed to store vast amounts of information. The captain called it the archive. It was unlike anything we'd seen before. Rows upon rows of crystalline surfaces, each one humming faintly with stored energy. When we touched them, images and sounds would appear, stars and planets, voices speaking in languages we couldn't understand, scenes of landscapes that weren't Mars. "We're looking at their history," one of the scientists whispered. "This is who they were." Deciphering the archive became a priority. Every piece of information we uncovered felt like a thread in a larger tapestry, one that connected Mars, the builders, and perhaps even Earth. But the more we learned, the more questions we had. Who were they? Why did they leave? And why had they prepared Mars for us? One night, as we gathered outside to watch the stars, something unusual happened. The sky above us, so familiar in its stillness, suddenly changed. A series of lights appeared, moving in patterns that defied explanation. They weren't meteors or satellites, they were deliberate. The lights formed symbols, similar to those we'd seen in the builders' structures. They pulsed softly, their glow casting faint shadows across the settlement. We stared in silence, unsure of what we were witnessing. "It's them," the captain said, her voice barely audible. "They're still watching." The lights lingered for several minutes before fading, leaving the sky as empty as before. But the memory of that night stayed with us, a reminder that we weren't alone in the universe, and perhaps never had been. As New Horizon grew, so did the need for leadership. Decisions that had once been made by a handful of individuals now required input from the entire community. We formed the Martian Council, a group of settlers elected by their peers to represent the diverse voices of the settlement. The council met in a newly built dome, its walls adorned with murals of Earth and Mars. Their first act was to draft the Martian Charter, a set of principles that would guide us as we continued to build our new world. The Charter emphasized unity, sustainability, and a commitment to learning from the mistakes of Earth. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a framework for a society that could thrive on a planet so different from the one we had left behind. As the settlement thrived, we began to dream of what might come next. Could we terraform the entire planet? Could we create cities, forests, oceans? The possibilities felt endless, limited only by our imagination and determination. But as we looked to the future, we also honored the past. The Builder's legacy was a constant reminder of our responsibility, not just to Mars, but to each other. Their gift had given us a second chance, and it was up to us to make the most of it. Every day, as I walked through the settlement, I felt a sense of awe at what we had accomplished. The barren landscape that had greeted us when we first arrived was now teeming with life, a testament to the resilience of humanity and the power of hope. Mars was no longer just a planet. It was a story, one that we were writing together. And as I stood under the shade of a Martian tree, listening to the laughter of children and the rustle of leaves, I knew that the best chapters were still to come. The day we broke ground for the second settlement felt like a turning point. We called it Horizon Reach, a name that symbolized both our progress and our ambition. It wasn't just an extension of New Horizon, it was a new beginning, a chance to apply everything we'd learned in creating a sustainable community. The location was chosen carefully, near a vast underground reservoir that the Builders Network had helped unearth. It was an area rich in potential, with fertile soil and enough sunlight to power an expanding solar grid. As we stood at the site, surrounded by crates of supplies and eager settlers, it was hard not to feel a sense of history in the making. Building a second settlement wasn't easy. The work was grueling, and the conditions reminded us that Mars was still a planet of extremes. But the lessons we'd learned from New Horizon made us stronger. We built better shelters, more efficient systems, and stronger connections between the settlements. Soon, Horizon Reach wasn't just a site, it was a community. Families moved in, farms were planted, and the first school was established before the domes were even fully operational. The sight of children running across the Martian soil, their laughter echoing through the thin air, was a reminder of why we were here. With the success of Horizon Reach, the Builders Network became even more critical. We had only activated a fraction of the structures scattered across Mars, but their potential was undeniable. Each new activation brought more life to the planet. Streams became rivers, green patches turned into meadows, and the air grew richer with every passing day. The Builders Archive continued to guide us. As we deciphered more of its messages, we began to understand the complexity of the network. It wasn't just about sustaining life. It was about creating a balance, a system where every element supported the others. One day, while exploring a remote structure, we found something that took our breath away. It was a blueprint, etched into the glowing walls, showing a vision of Mars transformed. The red planet we had known was gone, replaced by a vibrant world of oceans, forests, and cities. "This is their dream," one of the scientists said, tracing the lines with her gloved hand. And now it's ours. The third wave of settlers brought with them new technologies and ideas that accelerated our progress. Engineers developed advanced drones that could map and terraform vast areas of land. Scientists introduced genetically modified plants designed to thrive in Martian soil, speeding up the greening process. But it wasn't just about survival anymore. The third wave included artists, writers, musicians, and philosophers, people who came not to build, but to inspire. They painted murals on the walls of the domes, wrote stories about life on Mars, and composed music that echoed through the settlement during quiet evenings. Mars was becoming more than a home. It was becoming a culture, a place where humanity's creativity and resilience could flourish. The settlers began to call themselves Martians, not as a rejection of Earth, but as an embrace of the new identity we were forging together. The first Martian festival was held on the anniversary of our landing. It started as a simple idea, a day to celebrate how far we'd come, but it quickly grew into something much larger. The settlements came together in the central plaza of New Horizon, where tables were set up with food grown in our fields and hydroponic gardens. Musicians played under the open sky, their instruments carrying melodies that felt both familiar and new. Children performed plays about the builders, their imaginations filling in the gaps of what we didn't know. As night fell, we gathered around a massive projection of Earth and Mars, the two planets side by side. It was a reminder of where we had come from and where we were going. The festival became an annual tradition, a time for reflection and hope. It was a day when we paused to celebrate not just our survival, but our growth, our transformation into something greater than we had been before. With two settlements thriving and more on the horizon, the Martian Council faced a decision. Should we remain independent or formalize our connection to Earth? The question sparked intense debate, with settlers on both sides arguing passionately. Some believed that Mars needed to establish its own identity, free from the mistakes of Earth. Others argued that collaboration with Earth was essential, especially as more settlers arrived. The decision was put to a vote, the first election held on Mars. It was a moment that felt historic, not just for our settlement, but for humanity as a whole. In the end, the vote was split, leading to a compromise. Mars would remain connected to Earth, but with its own governing body and autonomy in local matters. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step toward defining who we were and who we wanted to be. As Mars continued to transform, the builders' influence became even more apparent. The structures they had left behind weren't just tools, they were lessons, reminders of a civilization that had reached heights we could only dream of. One day, while exploring a newly uncovered chamber, we found something that stopped us in our tracks. It was a message, written in symbols we had come to recognize but never fully understand. After weeks of decoding, we pieced together its meaning. To those who follow, we were not the first, and you will not be the last. Build wisely, dream boldly, and remember, you are not alone. The words resonated deeply, a reminder that humanity's journey was part of something much larger. The builders had left us a gift, not just a planet, but a purpose. As the settlements thrived and Mars blossomed, our gaze began to shift outward. The builders' legacy had shown us that life could exist beyond Earth, that the universe was vast and filled with possibilities. The Martian Council began discussing plans for exploration beyond Mars. Could we reach the moons of Jupiter? The icy expanses of Saturn? The distant worlds that the builders' maps had hinted at? For the first time, the idea of leaving Mars didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a continuation. We weren't just settlers anymore. We were explorers, dreamers, creators, and the universe was waiting. As I write this, the sky above New Horizon is filled with stars. The air around me carries the faint scent of Martian soil, mingled with the rustle of leaves from a nearby grove. Children's laughter echoes in the distance, blending with the hum of machinery and the soft melodies of a musician practicing in the plaza. Mars is alive. We are alive. And this is just the beginning. The builders showed us that the universe is vast, that life can endure, that hope can thrive even in the harshest of places. Their story became our story. And now we're writing the next chapter. A story of resilience, of growth, of boundless possibility. Mars isn't just a planet anymore. It's a home. And it's a promise that humanity's best days are still ahead. Every new arrival to Mars brought fresh perspectives. The fourth wave of settlers wasn't just larger, it was more diverse. They came from every corner of Earth, carrying with them the languages, traditions, and cultures of humanity's rich history. For the first time, Mars began to feel like a tapestry woven from the threads of many worlds. At first, it was overwhelming. Coordinating the arrival of so many people, distributing resources, and integrating new systems tested the limits of our fledgling society. But with the challenges came opportunities. The newcomers introduced innovative farming techniques, new methods for preserving water, and even a few musical instruments we hadn't seen before. A group of settlers from Kenya transformed one of the greenhouses into a tropical garden, filled with banana plants and cassava. Another team from Japan designed a Zen-inspired dome, complete with a rock garden and a small koi pond. These additions didn't just provide food or beauty, they gave Mars a soul. Walking through the settlement now, you could hear snatches of music, catch glimpses of colorful murals, and smell the scent of unfamiliar spices drifting through the air. Mars wasn't just a survival project anymore. It was becoming a living, breathing culture. The idea came from Sophia, the artist who had painted so many of the murals around New Horizon. "We need something to mark this moment," she said one day, her hands streaked with paint. "A way to show that we're not just surviving, we're thriving." The settlers embraced the idea with enthusiasm. Lights were strung across the domes, their glow soft and warm against the Martian dusk. Lanterns made from recycled materials floated in the air, their gentle movement guided by the breeze. Families crafted small sculptures and decorations, each one a reflection of their heritage. On the night of the festival, the settlements came alive. Children raced through the streets, their laughter mingling with the hum of music. Food stalls lined the plaza, offering dishes from every corner of Earth, and a few created right here on Mars. The air was filled with stories, laughter, and the quiet joy of a community coming together. As the lights danced across the sky, we stood in awe, our faces illuminated by their glow. It was a celebration of who we were, where we'd come from, and the new world we were building together. Not every discovery was cause for celebration. While exploring an uncharted region near Olympus Mons, a team of geologists uncovered another chamber, buried deep beneath layers of rock. Inside, they found carvings that seemed to depict the builders' downfall. The images were haunting. A once thriving world, its skies darkened by storms, its cities crumbling into ruin. The symbols on the walls told a story of excess, of a civilization that had pushed its planet too far. The final carving showed the builders leaving, their glowing ships vanishing into the stars. When the team returned, they brought back not just the carvings, but a sense of foreboding. "They left because they had no choice," one of the geologists said, "and they left Mars for us. But what happens if we make the same mistakes?" The discovery sparked debates across the settlements. Could humanity avoid the pitfalls that had doomed the builders? Or were we destined to repeat their fate? The Martian Council responded by tightening regulations on resource use and launching new initiatives for sustainable living. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about stewardship. The children born on Mars were different. Not in appearance, they looked like any other children, but in their understanding of the world. For them, Mars wasn't a challenge to overcome. It was home. They grew up under the soft light of the Martian sun, their days filled with exploration and discovery. They knew the names of every plant in the greenhouses, the location of every stream, the stories behind every mural. They learned to read the stars, not as distant points of light, but as markers of where humanity might one day go. One of the most remarkable children was Mira, the first Martian born. By the time she was 10, she was already helping in the greenhouses, her small hands deftly planting seeds and checking irrigation lines. She spoke 3 languages, knew how to repair a solar panel, and could recite entire passages from the builder's archive. Watching Mira and the other children, it was impossible not to feel hope. They carried the future of Mars in their hands, and they treated it with a care and reverence that was humbling to witness. As the settlements flourished, Our gaze turned outward once more. The Builder's archive had revealed glimpses of other worlds, places where their influence might still linger. The Martian Council debated the risks and rewards of venturing beyond our red home. Finally, the decision was made. Humanity would take its first steps into the wider universe. A team of explorers was assembled, their mission to follow the Builder's path and uncover the secrets of the stars. The day the ship launched was bittersweet. We gathered at the edge of the settlement, watching as the vessel rose into the sky, its engines blazing bright against the Martian dawn. It was a reminder that our story didn't end on Mars. It was just the beginning. As I sit here, watching the first rays of the sun stretch across the horizon, I'm struck by how far we've come. The barren, lifeless planet we once knew is now a place of rivers and forests, of laughter and music, of hope and dreams. Mars is no longer just a planet. It's a home. It's a testament to what humanity can achieve when we work together, when we dream boldly, when we choose to build instead of destroy. The Builders gave us a gift, a chance to start anew. And as we look to the future, to the stars, to the endless possibilities that await, I can't help but feel that we've honored their legacy. This is Mars, and this is just the beginning. The settlements on Mars had grown to a point where our ad hoc council system wasn't enough. It was time for something bigger, something that could represent the diverse and thriving population we had become. The Martian Council proposed an election, a chance for settlers to choose leaders who would guide us into the future. The campaign season was unlike anything we'd experienced on Earth. There were no elaborate advertisements, no televised debates. Instead, candidates shared their visions through community meetings, conversations in the plazas, and messages transmitted across the settlements. The topics ranged from the practical, how to expand food production and improve air quality, to the philosophical. What kind of society did we want to build? What lessons should we carry forward from Earth? And what mistakes must we avoid? Election day was a celebration. People gathered in the domes, casting their votes with a mix of excitement and reverence. When the results were announced, it wasn't just a moment of political importance. It was a declaration of who we were as a people. For the first time, Mars had a government elected by its citizens, a step toward becoming a unified, self-sustaining civilization. As we continued exploring the Builder's network, we discovered what appeared to be its central hub, a massive structure buried deep beneath the surface, accessible only through a series of narrow tunnels. It was unlike anything we'd seen before, its scale and complexity far surpassing the other sites. Inside, we found a device that emitted a steady, rhythmic pulse. It was ancient, yet it felt alive, as if it were waiting for us. The Builder's archive had prepared us for this moment, but the reality of standing before their most significant creation was overwhelming. When we activated the device, the network responded immediately. The air grew warmer, the sky clearer, the rivers fuller. It was as though the planet had been holding its breath, and now it could finally exhale. But the device wasn't just a tool for terraforming. It was a message, a final communication from the Builders. As the patterns on its surface shifted, we realized they were forming words, a language we had begun to understand. Do better than we did. It was a simple phrase, but it carried the weight of an entire civilization's hopes and regrets. The Builders hadn't just given us the tools to survive, they had given us the wisdom to thrive. With the planet transforming faster than we'd thought possible, the settlements began to grow into something more. New Horizon and Horizon Reach expanded into bustling hubs of activity, connected by a network of pathways and transportation systems. The green zones spread outward, creating fertile land that could support even larger populations. The settlers began designing the first true Martian city, a place where art, science, and community could flourish side by side. The city was named Lumina, after the soft, glowing light that had become a symbol of Mars' rebirth. Lumina was unlike any city on Earth. Its buildings were constructed from Martian materials, their designs inspired by the Builder's architecture. Solar panels covered every surface, collecting energy to power the entire settlement. Gardens and parks filled the spaces between buildings, creating a seamless blend of nature and technology. At the heart of the city was the Archive Dome, a place where the builder's legacy and humanity's history were preserved and studied. It became a gathering place for settlers, a reminder of where we had come from and where we were going. As Mars grew, so did the need for education. The children of Mars were curious, resourceful, and eager to learn, but they needed more than the makeshift schools we'd established. The settlers came together to build the Martian Academy, the first institution of its kind on the planet. The Academy was more than just a school. It was a center of learning and innovation, a place where children and adults alike could study everything from engineering and agriculture to art and philosophy. Its curriculum blended the knowledge of Earth with the discoveries we'd made on Mars, creating a uniquely Martian perspective. Mira, now a teenager, was one of the Academy's first students. Watching her and her peers study in classrooms filled with light and life, it was impossible not to feel a sense of pride. They were the future of Mars, and they were ready to take it further than we ever could. One evening, as the sky darkened over Lumina, the observatory picked up a signal, a faint, rhythmic pulse coming from deep space. It matched the patterns we'd seen in the Builder's archive, a language we had come to recognize. The discovery sent shockwaves through the settlements. Was it the Builders? Had they survived, scattered across the stars? Or was it another civilization, reaching out across the void? The signal's source was far beyond our reach, but it reignited our sense of wonder and curiosity. The Martian Council established a team to study the signal, hoping to decode its meaning and determine its origin. For the first time, Mars wasn't just looking inward. We were looking outward, toward the stars. Mars today is a world transformed. The rivers that flow through its valleys, the forests that stretch toward the horizon, the cities that hum with life, all of it is a testament to the resilience of humanity and the generosity of the Builders. We've built more than a settlement. We've built a civilization, one that reflects the best of who we are. And as we look to the future, we carry with us the lessons of the past, to live in harmony with our world, to cherish the bonds that unite us, and to dream boldly of what lies beyond. The Builders showed us what was possible. Now it's up to us to take the next step. Mars is just the beginning. The universe is vast, filled with worlds waiting to be discovered, stories waiting to be written. And as I stand here watching the sun rise over Lumina, I can't help but feel that we're ready. Ready to build, to explore, to become something greater. This is Mars, this is home, and this is our story. As Mars grew, the need for collaboration among the settlements became apparent. Each settlement had its strengths. Lumina excelled in innovation and technology. Horizon Reach led in agriculture, and New Dawn specialized in energy production. But as we expanded, so did the complexities of managing resources and addressing disputes. The Martian Unity Accord was proposed, a framework for governing Mars as a collective, while respecting the independence of each settlement. Representatives from all the settlements gathered in Lumina's central plaza to draft the document, their debates reflecting the diversity of experiences and ideas on the planet. The discussions were passionate but respectful, rooted in the shared understanding that our survival depended on cooperation. The final agreement outlined principles of equality, sustainability, and mutual support, creating a council where every settlement had an equal voice. When the accord was signed, the celebrations lasted through the night. It wasn't just a political milestone, it was a declaration of unity, a promise that Mars would rise together. Time on Mars had always been a challenge. The days were longer, the years stretched out, and Earth's calendar didn't quite fit the rhythm of our lives here. As our settlements grew, so did the need for a system of timekeeping that felt uniquely Martian. A committee of scientists, artists, and historians came together to create the Martian calendar. They based it on the planet's natural cycles, dividing the year into 12 months that aligned with the seasons we were beginning to see emerge. Each month was named after an aspect of Mars's transformation. Months like Solus, named for the warmth of the sun, and Viridia, celebrating the green patches that had become fields. The first day of the calendar year, Redrise, marked the anniversary of humanity's arrival on the planet. The calendar was more than a practical tool. It was a way to mark our new identity. Time no longer felt borrowed from Earth. It was ours. Exploring the builder's structures continued to yield surprises. One day, while excavating near the edge of Valles Marineris, a team discovered a cache of artifacts, unlike anything we'd seen before. They were small, intricate objects, their surfaces covered in patterns that seemed to shift when touched. We brought them back to the archive dome, where scientists and historians worked together to study them. The artifacts appeared to be tools, but their purpose remained a mystery. Some emitted faint glows when activated, while others produced sounds that resembled music. One artifact, when connected to the builder's network, projected images into the air, scenes of planets we didn't recognize, creatures we'd never seen, and cities that seemed to defy the laws of physics. It was a glimpse into a world far beyond our understanding, a reminder of how much there was still to learn. Among the builder's artifacts, we found something unexpected. Seeds. They were unlike any we'd encountered on Earth or Mars, their shells shimmering with colors that shifted in the light. The archive contained instructions for planting them, but the process was complex, requiring specific conditions we had to recreate. When the first seed sprouted, it was like watching a miracle. The plant grew rapidly, its leaves a deep blue that seemed to glow faintly at night. It wasn't just beautiful, it was functional. The plant released oxygen at a rate far higher than any of our Earth-based species, helping to enrich the atmosphere around it. We called them starseed plants, a name that reflected both their origins and their potential. As we began cultivating them, they became a cornerstone of our efforts to terraform Mars, accelerating the transformation of the planet. The Builder's Network had always hinted at something larger, a system designed not just to sustain life, but to reshape the planet entirely. One day, while activating a structure near the northern pole, we discovered what that meant. A vast underground reservoir, larger than anything we'd imagined, began to surface. Water flowed into ancient channels, filling basins that had been dry for millennia. What started as small lakes quickly grew, connecting into rivers that spread across the landscape. The first Martian ocean was born. We named it Mare Genesis, a tribute to the new life it represented. Settlements sprang up along its shores, their domes reflecting off the water's surface. The ocean transformed Mars in ways we hadn't thought possible, creating a climate that grew more hospitable with each passing year. Standing on the edge of Mare Genesis, watching waves lap against the red sand, it felt like a dream. Mars was alive. Years after we first detected the builder's signal, a response came. It was faint, distant, but unmistakable. A rhythmic pulse that echoed the patterns we had sent back. The message was short, its meaning unclear, but it was enough to reignite our curiosity. It suggested coordination, perhaps even acknowledgement. Were the builders still out there? Were they watching us? The Martian Council debated whether to send another message. Some worried about attracting attention from unknown civilizations, while others saw it as an opportunity to connect with our cosmic neighbors. In the end, the decision was made. We would respond, sending not just a signal, but a message of who we were. It was a moment of profound hope. For the first time, Mars wasn't just reaching out to Earth. We were reaching out to the universe. As the settlements grew, so did our culture. Music, art, and stories flourished, capturing the spirit of life on Mars. One of the most moving creations was the new Martian anthem, a piece of music composed by a group of settlers from different backgrounds. The anthem wasn't like anything on Earth. It blended the sounds of Martian wind, the hum of the builder's structures, and melodies played on instruments crafted from Martian materials. Its lyrics spoke of resilience, unity, and the beauty of a planet reborn. The first time it was performed, during the Festival of Lights, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. The anthem became a symbol of who we were, Martians, united by a shared journey and a shared dream. As I sit here, under the shade of a starseed tree, the sound of waves from Mare Genesis in the distance, I can't help but feel a sense of wonder. Mars has become so much more than we ever imagined. It's not just a place to live, it's a place to thrive, to dream, to build. We've transformed this planet, and in doing so, we've transformed ourselves. The challenges we've faced, the lessons we've learned, the bonds we've forged, they've made us stronger, more united. Mars is our home, but it's also a stepping stone. The builders showed us the way, and now it's up to us to take the next step. The stars are waiting, and we're ready. This is Mars. This is our story, and it's only just beginning. Even as Mars grew more self-sufficient, our connection to Earth remained vital. Communication between the two worlds had become seamless, with messages and data exchanged daily. Families reunited through video calls, and Earth watched in awe as Mars shared its progress. The trade routes established between the planets brought more than just goods. They brought a sense of continuity. Earth sent advanced technology, cultural treasures, and vital resources, while Mars sent back its discoveries. Insights from the Builder's archive, samples of starseed plants, and solutions to problems Earth was grappling with. The Martian Council established the Interplanetary Exchange Program, allowing settlers from both planets to experience life on the other. Young Martians traveled to Earth, marveling at its vast oceans and forests, while Earthlings visited Mars, walking among its red sands and green fields. These exchanges deepened the bond between the two worlds, reminding us that, despite the distance, we were still one species. With the Unity Accord in place and settlements flourishing, the time had come for Mars to establish a more formal system of governance. The Martian Parliament was born, a body of representatives elected from every settlement to ensure that every voice was heard. The Parliament convened in a grand dome in Lumina, its design inspired by the builder's structures. Inside, light filtered through translucent panels, casting intricate patterns on the floor. The representatives sat in a circle, symbolizing equality and unity. Their first order of business was drafting the Martian Constitution, a document that codified the principles we had lived by: sustainability, equality, and the pursuit of knowledge. It also included provisions to protect the environment, ensuring that Mars's transformation would be guided by respect for the planet. The creation of the Parliament marked a new era for Mars. It was no longer just a collection of settlements. It was a unified society, ready to face the future together. As Mars flourished, attention turned to its two moons, Phobos and Deimos. The Builder's archive suggested that these celestial bodies might hold clues to their presence, and the Martian Council approved a mission to explore them. The mission was led by Lena, the botanist who had been instrumental in transforming Mars. Her team landed on Phobos first, discovering ancient structures that mirrored those on Mars, though smaller and more eroded. Inside, they found artifacts and carvings that hinted at the Builder's use of the moons as observation posts. Deimos, though less hospitable, yielded even greater discoveries. Beneath its surface, the team uncovered a chamber filled with star charts, mapping not just our solar system, but others far beyond. The charts were a revelation, suggesting that the Builders had traveled farther than we had ever imagined, and that their influence might extend across the galaxy. As life on Mars became more stable, settlers began to tell stories. These weren't just accounts of our struggles and triumphs. They were imaginative tales, inspired by the planet's unique landscape and the mysteries of the Builders. One of the first novels written on Mars was The Red Whisper, a story about a young settler who discovers a hidden network of tunnels beneath the surface, leading to an ancient secret that could change the course of humanity. The book captured the imaginations of readers on both Mars and Earth, becoming a bestseller across the two worlds. Poets and playwrights also flourished, drawing inspiration from the planet's transformation. Their works explored themes of resilience, identity, and the connection between humanity and the cosmos. Mars was no longer just a place, it was a muse, sparking creativity in ways we hadn't anticipated. Sport became a vital part of life on Mars, bringing settlers together in friendly competition. The Martian Games were established, an event that combined Earth's traditional sports with new ones designed for the planet's unique environment. One of the most popular sports was Marsball, played in low gravity with a spherical arena and glowing orbs that changed color based on their movement. It required agility, strategy, and teamwork, and quickly became a favorite pastime across the settlements. The games weren't just about winning, they were about unity. Teams from different settlements came together to compete, fostering camaraderie and mutual respect. The event became a highlight of the Martian calendar, drawing crowds to Lumina's stadium and streaming to audiences on Earth. One quiet evening, a signal was detected, unlike any we'd received before. It was strong, clear, and undeniably from the builders. The patterns weren't just familiar, they were a direct response to the messages we had sent years ago. The signal contained coordinates, pointing to a remote area near the southern pole. A team was assembled to investigate, their journey filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. When they arrived, they found a ship, smaller than we'd imagined, but unmistakably of builder origin. As the team approached, the ship emitted a soft glow, and a voice, gentle and melodic, filled the air. It wasn't a language we understood, but the tone was welcoming, almost curious. The builders hadn't returned in person, but they had sent an emissary, a vessel that seemed to bridge the gap between us. The discovery reignited debates across Mars. What did the builders want? Were they observing us, guiding us, or simply curious? The answers weren't clear, but one thing was certain. The connection between humanity and the builders was far from over. Mars is no longer a frontier. It's a home, a culture, a civilization. The red planet that once seemed so distant and barren is now a place of rivers, forests, and cities filled with life. We've built something extraordinary here, not just structures and systems, but a way of living that reflects our best selves. We've learned to work together, to respect our environment, and to dream of what lies beyond. As we look to the future, to the stars, and to the mysteries that still await, we carry with us the lessons of Mars. It's a story of transformation, of resilience, of hope. And it's a story that's only just beginning. Mars is more than a planet. It's a promise, a reminder that no matter how vast the universe may be, humanity has the power to thrive, to connect, and to create. This is Mars. This is our story. And the next chapter is ours to write. There's a phrase that has taken root in every settlement, spoken with both reverence and determination. The Martian dream. It's not just about survival or even progress. It's about creating a world that reflects the best of humanity. The Martian dream is a vision of equality, where every voice is heard, every skill valued. It's a society that prizes curiosity and creativity, where innovation isn't just encouraged, it's celebrated. It's a commitment to living in harmony with our environment, ensuring that the mistakes of Earth are not repeated. In Lumina, a massive mural now spans one of the central domes. Painted by Sophia and a team of artists, it depicts the evolution of Mars, the barren wasteland of the past, the thriving settlements of today, and the hopeful visions of tomorrow. At its center is a single phrase, written in bold, glowing letters. The Martian dream lives in us all. This dream is what drives us, what keeps us planting seeds, building homes, and reaching for the stars. The builder's star charts, discovered beneath Deimos, pointed to systems far beyond our reach, but not beyond our imagination. With the terraforming of Mars now self-sustaining, the Martian Council approved a mission that would take humanity's first steps toward the stars. The ship was named Pioneer, a nod to the spirit of exploration that had brought us to Mars and would now carry us further. Its construction was a joint effort, combining Earth's resources with Martian innovation. The ship's hull was reinforced with Martian alloys, its propulsion system powered by a hybrid technology inspired by the builder's designs. On the day of the launch, settlers from every corner of Mars gathered to watch. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. As the ship rose into the sky, its engines blazing bright, cheers erupted across the settlements. The Pioneer was more than a vessel. It was a symbol of humanity's boundless potential. As the first generation of Martian-born children grew, they began to ask questions. Why were decisions made a certain way? What would Mars look like when they were adults? How could they shape their own future? To answer these questions, the Martian Parliament established the Children's Council, a forum where young Martians could voice their ideas, concerns, and dreams. The council met in the Academy, its members elected by their peers. Their ideas were bold and imaginative. They proposed creating more open spaces for play and relaxation, designing new art installations across the settlements, and introducing programs to teach the history of Mars and Earth in ways that were engaging and interactive. The Children's Council wasn't just symbolic, it was transformative. Their input began to influence real decisions, shaping policies that reflected the needs and aspirations of Mars' youngest citizens. Watching these children take their place in our society, it was clear that the future of Mars was in good hands. As we expanded our explorations of Mars, we began to look beneath the surface, curious about what lay in the planet's depths. Using advanced drilling technology, we reached a vast cavern system that had been untouched for millennia. The caverns were breathtaking. Stalactites glistened with minerals, their surfaces reflecting the light from our headlamps. Underground rivers flowed through the chambers, their waters fed by the melting ice caps above. And in the deepest chamber, we found something extraordinary. A crystalline structure that pulsed faintly with light. The structure was unlike anything we'd seen, even in the builder's designs. Its patterns seemed to shift and flow, responding to our presence. Scientists theorized that it was a natural formation influenced by the builder's network, a fusion of nature and technology. We named the caverns Ethereum, a place of wonder and discovery. Plans were made to study the area carefully, ensuring that its fragile beauty would be preserved for generations to come. Mars has become more than a home. It's a launchpad for humanity's future. The builder's network continues to reveal its secrets, guiding us as we prepare for the next steps in our journey. The transformation of the planet is ongoing, its rivers and forests spreading farther each year. The sky, once thin and pale, grows richer with every cycle. But Mars is just the beginning. The Pioneer sends back updates from its journey, sharing glimpses of distant stars and planets that spark our imaginations. The builder's signal continues to pulse, a reminder that we are not alone in the universe. And here, on the red soil of Mars, we continue to dream. We dream of new worlds, new connections, new possibilities. The Martian dream is alive in every tree we plant, every story we tell, every step we take toward the unknown. Mars has taught us that humanity is capable of incredible things. It's a lesson we carry with us as we look to the stars, ready to write the next chapter of our story. This is Mars. This is home. And the universe awaits. As Mars became more established, a unique way of speaking began to develop among its settlers. It wasn't just a collection of words. It was a reflection of the life we had built together. The language was a blend of Earth's many tongues, infused with new terms born from the Martian experience. Words like solrise and starseep described the changing light of the Martian day. Phrases such as builder's gift and redroot referred to the mysterious technologies and flora that now defined our world. Even greetings changed, with settlers often saying, "Under two suns," a reference to the warmth of our growing community and the light of Earth's distant star. The children of Mars, unburdened by Earth's linguistic traditions, embraced this evolving language with enthusiasm. They invented their own slang, mixing ancient Earth expressions with Martian innovations. By the time they reached adulthood, the language of Mars had become as distinct as the planet itself, a symbol of our new identity. One of the greatest mysteries of the builders was their apparent understanding of the universe's structure. The star charts discovered beneath Deimos hinted at connections between celestial bodies that defied our understanding of physics. In response, the Martian Council launched the Martian Cosmos Project, a multi-settlement initiative to study these charts and uncover their secrets. Observatories across the planet were upgraded with advanced builder-inspired technology, allowing us to peer deeper into the cosmos than ever before. The project attracted scientists and dreamers from both Mars and Earth, united by a shared curiosity. Over time, their efforts began to bear fruit. They identified patterns in the builder's charts that suggested pathways, corridors of space where travel might be faster or more efficient. The discovery was groundbreaking, opening the door to the possibility of interstellar exploration. The builders had left us more than a network on Mars. They had left us a map to the stars. Music had always been a unifying force on Mars, but as our culture grew, so did the desire to create something larger, a Martian orchestra that could capture the essence of our new world. Musicians from every settlement came together, bringing instruments made from Martian materials and songs inspired by the planet's transformation. The orchestra's debut performance was held in Lumina, under the glow of the Archive Dome. The music was unlike anything heard on Earth. It blended the deep, resonant tones of Martian stone instruments with the ethereal hum of builder technology. The melodies rose and fell like the winds of the planet, carrying the audience on a journey through its history. When the final note faded, the silence was filled with awe. The orchestra had done more than create music. It had captured the soul of Mars. One morning, as settlers began their day, a strange phenomenon occurred. Across the settlements, the builders' devices began to emit a soft, harmonic hum. The sound was gentle, almost soothing, but it was impossible to ignore. The hum lasted for hours, and during that time, the devices displayed patterns we had never seen before, shifting shapes that seemed to tell a story. Scientists scrambled to record the event, calling it the Builder's Echo. When the hum ceased, it left behind more questions than answers. What had triggered it? Was it a message, a warning, or simply a natural function of the Builder's technology? The echo became a subject of intense study, and though its meaning remained elusive, it reinforced one thing. The Builders were far more complex than we had ever imagined. As Mars continued to thrive, the Martian Parliament proposed an unprecedented event, the Great Martian Assembly, a gathering of representatives from every settlement to discuss the future of the planet. It was to be the largest meeting in Martian history, a chance for every voice to be heard. The assembly was held in a newly constructed amphitheater near Mare Genesis, its design inspired by ancient Earth structures and builder aesthetics. Thousands of settlers attended, with even more watching remotely from their domes. The discussions covered everything from environmental preservation to interstellar exploration. Children presented ideas from the Children's Council, artists showcased their visions of the future, and scientists shared their latest discoveries. By the assembly's end, several key initiatives had been agreed upon, including the construction of a Martian university, the establishment of protected natural zones, and the creation of a mission to explore the Builder's star corridors. The Great Martian Assembly wasn't just a meeting, it was a milestone, a declaration of our shared commitment to the planet and its future. The idea for a Martian university had been discussed for years, but it wasn't until after the Great Assembly that it became a reality. Built on the shores of Mare Genesis, the university was named Nova Lux, meaning new light. Nova Lux offered courses in every field imaginable: terraforming, builder technology, Martian literature, and interplanetary diplomacy. It attracted students from both Mars and Earth, creating a melting pot of ideas and cultures. The university's campus was a marvel of Martian engineering. Its buildings were constructed from translucent materials that glowed softly at night, powered entirely by solar energy. Green spaces and water features made it a serene place for learning, a reflection of the harmony we were striving to achieve. Novolux became more than an institution. It became a beacon of knowledge, a place where the next generation could prepare to shape the future of Mars and beyond. Mars today is unrecognizable from the planet we first arrived on. Its rivers flow freely, its forests stretch across the horizon, and its settlements hum with life. The Builder's network continues to guide us, transforming the planet in ways we never thought possible. But the true legacy of Mars isn't its transformation, it's the people. The settlers who came here with nothing but hope, the children who grew up under its pale sun, and the communities that turned a barren world into a thriving civilization. Mars is a testament to what humanity can achieve when we work together, when we dream boldly, and when we respect the worlds we inhabit. It's a reminder that our story is far from over, that the universe is vast, filled with possibilities waiting to be explored. This is Mars, this is our home, and this is only the beginning. The first Martian-born generation was coming of age, and with them came an entirely new perspective. For them, Mars wasn't a challenge, it was normal. The rust-colored horizons and green valleys weren't alien, they were home. These young Martians approached problems differently. They weren't tied to Earth's traditions or ways of thinking. Their solutions were imaginative, bold, and deeply influenced by the unique environment they had grown up in. They invented tools to harness Martian winds for energy, devised new techniques for cultivating crops in the red soil, and even created games that could only exist in the planet's low gravity. One of their most ambitious projects was the Skybridge. a massive structure connecting two settlements across a canyon. Designed by a team of young architects and engineers, it used lightweight Martian materials and builder-inspired techniques. When it was completed, the skybridge became a symbol of what the new generation could achieve. These children, now adults, carried Mars forward in ways we had never anticipated. Their creativity and courage ensured that the planet would continue to thrive. While exploring a remote region near the southern pole, a team of researchers stumbled upon what appeared to be a hidden chamber within a builder structure. Unlike previous discoveries, this one required a complex sequence to open, one that we pieced together from symbols found in the archive. When the chamber finally opened, it revealed an array of devices unlike anything we had seen. At the center was a console that began to hum softly when approached. The builders had left behind something extraordinary, a repository of their knowledge. The console projected images of other worlds, other civilizations, and technologies we could barely comprehend. Among these was a detailed map of the builders' network, showing not just Mars, but other planets they had terraformed across the galaxy. It was clear, Mars wasn't an isolated effort. The builders had seeded life across countless worlds, creating a vast web of interconnected planets. The discovery was humbling. We were part of something much larger than ourselves. The builder's map ignited a new wave of exploration. If Mars was just one node in a larger network, what could we learn from the others? The Martian Council convened to discuss how to proceed, balancing the risks of interstellar travel with the potential rewards. It was decided. Mars would launch its first interstellar expedition. The ship, named Odyssey, was a masterpiece of Martian and Earth engineering, equipped with builder-inspired technology to traverse the corridors identified in the star charts. The mission's crew was selected carefully, a mix of scientists, engineers, and artists who could document the journey and share their discoveries. The launch was a global event, watched by billions on both Mars and Earth. As the Odyssey disappeared into the Martian sky, its mission symbolized more than just exploration. It was a declaration that humanity, with the builder's guidance, was ready to take its place among the stars. The transformation of Mars continued in unexpected ways. One of the most striking developments was the Green Heart, a vast forest that had grown in the center of the planet's largest valley. The builder's network had accelerated its growth, creating an ecosystem that was both self-sustaining and breathtakingly beautiful. The Green Heart became a focal point for settlers. Scientists studied its biodiversity, discovering new species of plants and insects. Artists painted its towering trees and glowing flowers. Families visited for picnics, walking along trails that wound through the vibrant landscape. It wasn't just a natural wonder, it was a reminder of what we had achieved. The Green Heart symbolized the harmony we had created between humanity and Mars, a living testament to our ability to nurture life on a once barren world. With the launch of the Odyssey and the growing interest in interstellar exploration, the Martian Space Academy was founded. Located in a valley near Lumina, the Academy was dedicated to training the next generation of explorers. The curriculum was rigorous, combining traditional fields like astronomy and engineering with courses on builder technology and Martian innovation. Students learned how to pilot spacecraft, navigate using the builder's star charts, and survive in the harshest environments. The first graduating class included young Martians who had grown up dreaming of the stars. Their enthusiasm was contagious, their excitement a reminder of why we had come to Mars in the first place, to push boundaries, to discover the unknown, and to inspire future generations. Years after the builder's emissary ship had been discovered, a new signal arrived, this time unmistakably indicating their return. The builders weren't coming to Mars directly, but their ship, much larger than the previous one, was set to enter the solar system. The Martian Council prepared for the event with a mix of excitement and caution. What did the builders want? Were they coming to guide us further, or simply to observe? When the ship arrived, it didn't land. Instead, it hovered in orbit, its surface glowing faintly. It transmitted a single message, written in symbols we had come to understand. You have done well. Continue. The message was brief, but its impact was profound. The builders had acknowledged us, not as followers but as equals. Their presence was a reminder that we were part of a larger story, one that spanned galaxies and generations. With Mars continuing to grow, the settlements voted to establish a unified government, one that would represent the entire planet. The first election was held with much fanfare, a celebration of democracy and unity. Candidates campaigned on platforms that emphasized sustainability, exploration, and cultural growth. The election was a global event, with settlers from every corner of Mars casting their votes. When the results were announced, the newly elected president of Mars stood before a crowd in Lumina's central plaza. Their speech was simple but powerful. Mars is not just a place, it's an idea. An idea that humanity can thrive, dream, and create a better future. Let's build it together. As Mars flourished, Earth looked on with pride and inspiration. The red planet, once a symbol of desolation, had become a beacon of hope. Its rivers, forests, and cities were proof that humanity could overcome even the greatest challenges. Mars was more than a home, it was a promise. A promise that we could learn from the past, build for the future, and reach for the stars. As we looked out across the transformed landscape, it was clear that the builders had given us more than a second chance. They had given us a purpose. And as humanity prepared to take its next steps into the cosmos, one thing was certain. The story of Mars was only the beginning. This is Mars, this is our legacy, and this is our future. As Mars expanded, the need for seamless communication became critical. The early radio and satellite systems that once connected settlers were no longer enough. The Martian Council approved the creation of the Martian Global Network, MGN, a project designed to provide instant and reliable communication across the entire planet. The MGN utilized a combination of Earth-based technology and builder enhancements, creating a system that not only transmitted data, but also monitored planetary conditions in real time. From the bustling domes of Lumina to the remote farms of Horizon Reach, every Martian could now stay connected. The MGN wasn't just a tool, it was a lifeline. It enabled scientists to share discoveries, farmers to optimize their yields, and families to stay in touch. The network also became a cultural hub, hosting forums, streaming events, and even virtual concerts that united settlers across Mars. For the first time, Mars felt truly interconnected, its people woven together by an invisible web of light and sound. With the challenges of survival largely overcome, Martian society experienced a cultural explosion. Artists, writers, and thinkers thrived, their work reflecting the unique spirit of life on Mars. One of the most celebrated creations was the Martian epic, a series of poems and stories that chronicled the planet's transformation. Written collaboratively by settlers of all ages, it captured the struggles, triumphs, and dreams of humanity's journey to the red planet. Martian architecture also flourished. Settlements began incorporating builder-inspired designs, creating structures that blended seamlessly with the environment. The domes of Lumina grew taller and more intricate, their surfaces etched with patterns that reflected the light of the Martian sun. This renaissance wasn't just about art. It was about identity. It was a way for Martians to define who they were, independent of Earth, and to celebrate the unique culture they had built together. The success of the Odyssey mission inspired a new era of exploration. The Martian Parliament approved the construction of an entire fleet of ships, each designed for interstellar travel. The fleet was named the Explorer's Armada, a tribute to the spirit of discovery that had brought humanity to Mars. Each ship was equipped with builder-inspired propulsion systems, advanced navigation tools, and habitats designed for long-term missions. The fleet's goal wasn't just to explore new worlds, it was to establish connections, share knowledge, and continue the builder's legacy. The launch of the first ship, Aurora, was a moment of profound significance. As it ascended into the sky, its engines blazing, the settlers of Mars looked up with a sense of unity and purpose. The universe was vast, but Mars was ready to meet it. While activating a new section of the builder's network, scientists discovered what appeared to be a series of challenges encoded within the system. These challenges, referred to as the builder's final test, required a combination of engineering, problem-solving, and creativity to unlock. The Martian Council assembled a team of experts to tackle the test, including scientists, artists, and even children, whose unique perspectives proved invaluable. Each challenge revealed new insights into the builders' technology, history, and philosophy. The final challenge led to a revelation, a hidden message from the builders, encoded in patterns of light and sound. The message was simple, yet profound. The path is yours to choose. Build wisely. The test was a reminder that the builders weren't just guiding us. They were challenging us to think for ourselves, to create our own future. As more settlements emerged, conflicts occasionally arose over resources and territory. To address these issues, the Martian Parliament proposed the First Martian Treaty, a comprehensive agreement that outlined the principles of coexistence and cooperation. The treaty emphasized the shared ownership of resources, the preservation of the environment, and the importance of cultural exchange. It was signed by representatives from every settlement, an act that symbolized unity and mutual respect. The signing ceremony was held on the shores of Mare Genesis, where the reflections of the settlement's lights danced on the water. The treaty wasn't just a document, it was a promise to work together, to ensure that Mars remained a place of hope and harmony. The relationship between Mars and Earth continued to evolve. While Mars had grown independent, its connection to Earth remained vital, both culturally and economically. To formalize this relationship, the two planets established the Mars-Earth Alliance. The alliance created a framework for trade, knowledge sharing, and collaborative projects. It also included provisions for joint missions, allowing Martians and Earthlings to work together in exploring the Builders' Network and beyond. The announcement of the alliance was met with celebration on both planets. For Martians, it was a recognition of their accomplishments. For Earthlings, it was a reminder of what humanity could achieve when united. The first generation of Martian-born leaders began to emerge, their ideas shaped by the unique challenges and opportunities of life on Mars. These leaders weren't just politicians. They were visionaries, educators, and innovators who represented the diverse voices of the planet. One of the most influential leaders was Mira, the first Martian-born child. Now an adult, she had grown into a passionate advocate for sustainability and exploration. Her speeches inspired settlers of all ages, her words carrying the weight of her experiences and dreams. Under the guidance of this new generation, Mars continued to thrive. The settlements grew, the culture deepened, and the planet's transformation accelerated. The future of Mars was in capable hands. The Builders' Corridors, long a subject of study and speculation, finally revealed their secrets. They were pathways through space, allowing for faster-than-light travel to distant systems. With this knowledge, Mars launched its first mission to explore these corridors, a journey that would take humanity farther than ever before. The ship, named Starseeker, was a symbol of everything Mars had become. Its crew included settlers from every corner of the planet, their skills and perspectives reflecting the diversity of Martian society. As the Starseeker disappeared into the corridor, a sense of awe and anticipation swept across Mars. The Builders had shown us the way, but now it was up to humanity to continue the journey. The stars were no longer out of reach. They were the next chapter of our story.